Daf Yomi, Tractate, Bava Batra, 6b, top of the page, with the words Bibira Gedola. Bibira Gedola. In a large building with many residences, the renter may make use of the building's projections and of the cavities in its external walls up to a distance of 4 cubits from his room, and he may make use of the thickness of the wall in a place where it is customary to do so. But as for making use of the building's front garden, he may not do so. And Rav Nachman himself said he may make use of even the building's front garden, but he may not use the garden that is at the back of the house. And Rava said he may use even the yard that is at the back of the house. Apropos the use of the wall between neighbors, Ravina says, if one's beam supporting a covering for shade was resting on his neighbor's wall for up to 30 days, there is no acquired privilege for him to continue using it, since the neighbor can claim that he had assumed that the beam was there only temporarily, and for that reason he did not protest. But after 30 days, there is an acquired privilege, and if it was for a sukkah that was being used for the mitzvah on the festival of Sukkot, for up to 7 days there is no acquired privilege for him to continue using it, since it assumed that it is there for the mitzvah, and that after the festival it will be removed. But after 7 days, the neighbor did not protest. There is an acquired privilege for him to continue using it. And if the one using the beam attached it with clay, there is immediately such an acquired privilege. Omar Abaye says, if there were 2 houses on 2 sides of a public domain, this one, the owner of one of the houses, must build a fence for his half of the roof, and the other one, the owner of that house, must build a fence for that half of the roof. They must position the fences so that one fence is not opposite the other fence, and each one must add his fence a little beyond the midway point, so that each one should not be able to see the activity on the other's roof. The Gemara asks, why discuss specifically the case of 2 houses on opposite sides of a public domain, considering that the same halacha should apply even if the 2 houses are separated by a private domain? The Gemara answers, it was necessary for Abaye to mention a public domain, lest you say that one neighbor can say to the other, ultimately you need to conceal yourself from people in the public domain. Since in any event, you have to build a fence across your entire roof. You cannot compel me to build a fence of my roof. To counter this, Abaye teaches us that this is not so, because the second homeowner can say to the first in response, the public can see me only during the day, when the pedestrians pass by, but they cannot see me at night. You, by contrast, can see me both during the day and at night. Alternatively, he can say, the public can see me from the street only when I am standing, but they cannot see me when I am sitting. You, by contrast, can see me both when I am standing and when I am sitting. And furthermore, the public can see me only when they look specifically at me, but they cannot see me when they do not look specifically at me, since the average pedestrian does not look up to see what is happening on the roofs. You, by contrast, can see me in any case because you live opposite me. The master, meaning Abaye, said above, This one, the owner of one of the houses, must build a fence for half of his roof, and that one, the owner of the other house, must build a fence for half of his roof. They must position the fences so that one fence is not opposite the other fence, and each one must add to his fence a little beyond the midway point. The Gemara asks, isn't it obvious that each one must make a fence for half his roof? Lo yitzrichon. The Gemara answers, no, it is necessary in a case where one of them went ahead on his own and constructed a fence on half his roof, lest you say that the other one can say to him, take from me compensation for the expenditure, and you build the entire fence, and in that way we will not invade another's privacy. Therefore, Abaye teaches us that the neighbor who built the fence for half his roof can say to him, what is the reason you do not want to build a fence? It is because the added weight will damage your house's foundation. My foundation, too, will be damaged if I continue to build on my roof. Rav Nachman says that Shmuel says, if one's roof is adjacent to his neighbor's courtyard, he must build a fence on the roof 4 cubits high, so that he will not be able to see into his neighbor's courtyard. But he is not required to build a fence between one roof and another roof. And Rav Nachman himself says, he is not required to build a fence 4 cubits high on the roof, but he is required to build a partition that is 10 handbreadths high. The Gemara asks, for what purpose, according to Rav Nachman, does the neighbor have to build such a partition? If it is to prevent damage caused by exposure to the sight of others, we require a partition of 4 cubits. If it is to catch the neighbor as a thief, in other words, to set a boundary between the two properties so that any trespass will be construed as attempted theft, a mere partition of pegs suffices. And if it is to prevent goats, and lambs from crossing from one roof to the other, a low partition that is high enough so that the goat or lamb will not be able to leap headlong from one roof to the other suffices. The Gemara answers, actually, it is built to catch the neighbor as a thief. With a partition of pegs, he can give an excuse and say that he was merely stretching himself, but with a partition of 10 handbreadths, he cannot give such an excuse. The Gemara raises an objection to the opinion of Rav Nachman from a Brisa. If his courtyard was higher than the other's roof, he is not required to attend to it. What? Is it not teaching that he is not required to attend to it at all? In other words, that he need not build any type of fence? The Gemara answers, no. It means that he is not required to attend to building a partition of 4 cubits, but he must attend to building a partition of 10 handbreadths as maintained by Rav Nachman. It was stated that Amoraim disagree. Without the following case, there are 2 adjoining courtyards, one higher than the other. Rav Huna says that the owner of the lower courtyard builds the wall, separating the courtyards from his level and upward, and the owner of the upper courtyard builds the wall from his level and upward. And Rav Chizda says the owner of the upper courtyard assists the owner of the lower courtyard and builds them from below, even including that part of the wall which is opposite the lower courtyard. The Gemara notes that it is taught in a Braita, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Chizda, if there were 2 adjoining courtyards, one higher than the other, the owner of the upper courtyard cannot say, I will build from my level and upward, but rather he assists the owner of the lower courtyard and builds from below. And if his courtyard is higher than the roof of his neighbor, he is not required to attend to it. The owner of the upper courtyard need not build a partition because people do not ordinarily use their roofs. It is related that 2 people were living in a 2-story building One was living in the upper story, and one was living in the lower one. The lower story began to collapse, its walls sinking into the ground to the point that it was no longer fit for dwelling. The owner of the lower story said to the owner of the upper story, "Come, let us demolish the whole building and rebuild it together." The owner of the upper story said to him, "I am living comfortably, and I am under no obligation to rebuild your residence." He's a fool. No? If the lower thing is caving, then the upper person is going to be eventually going to suffer. I don't know. We'll see tomorrow what's happening. Can't see.